Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Shaking Hands. I'm your host, Jack Moran. You can find me on Instagram at Blue Collar Kid. That is Blue Collar KEHD. We have today a very special guest, Rod Robertson. How are you, Rod?
I'm doing just fine.
Rod is a 30-year entrepreneur, has spent a lot of his time coaching and mentoring young entrepreneurs, has taught at the Harvard Business School, many of the leading academies around the world, and he's the author of a book that I use quite often in my day-to-day life, Winning in Entrepreneurship. So how are you doing today, Rod?
You know, I'm feeling strong. I'm glad to be with you, young Jack. Let's have some fun today.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I just want to get right into it and just kind of talk about, at this podcast, we talk a lot about, the experience of different entrepreneurs and, how their life experiences have gotten them to where they are today. So, I kind of wanted to start with where did you make the switch to being an entrepreneur in your early life? Were you working jobs or did you jump right into it from high school? Where'd you study? Kind of describe to me a little bit what the early life looked like.
My DNA was different. It was, I think now I look back at it, and it was always a entrepreneur's DNA. I could never settle down. I was a pretty bright guy, restless, had a lot going on, a lot of interest, but I couldn't get focused. I got fired from every job I ever had. I wasn't part of the thundering herd, and I didn't fit in very well. So my 20s were a restless period of disappointments until I finally got it together. I got my shit together, and in my late 20s, and I got on a roll. When I realized I didn't want a check, I needed a check, but I was never going to get a W-2. I was always just going to be out in the field. I was outside the walls of the Citadel. Everyone was inside. I was in the forest with the barbarians from the very beginning.
So what was that first venture? How did you enter the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, my world started as straight commission salesperson in Boston in real estate. And then I jumped up to become a real estate developer, did well at that. But then I got screwed over by the owners. And I didn't like that very much. I mean, I worked my ass off. I was in my early 30s. I was the president of a company, but I didn't look at the paperwork very closely, and some bad things happened. And before I knew it, I was in a battle with them, and I took my chips off the table that I had, and I went out and I bought a bankrupt pet food company, and I struggled and wrestled it up, and for 5 years I built it, structured it, and resold it, and then I did 2 other companies, one after the other, bang, bang. And one was good, one was bad. So it was the good, the bad, and the ugly for me. And I ended up, getting into this entrepreneurship game for good. I became a partner at Briggs Capital, briggscapital.com. And what we do is we represent entrepreneurs in their growth cycle. We help fund them, certain companies, and then we represent them when they sell them. And after they sell, we help them to position themselves, if they want another go at it, to do even something bigger and better and stronger. So it's not always about the first time coming out of the chute and hitting a home run. We really advocate that you go for a single or a double. And you know what? You get like your jump badge, like if it was the military. You know what? The first thing you want to do is you want to get there, and you want to be a winner, and you want to be able to be in a company and to build it up and to sell it. And then you can sit back and you can go for the home run on the next one. So the first time out, we don't always advocate for just mashing it and, like what you read about in all the outlets. And, you just don't go for the fence right away.
So what would be kind of the checkpoints if you were trying to get a single or double as an early entrepreneur?
Well, there's a couple different ways to go about it. And, for the people like me when I started, or everyone that, so many of the people, 95% of the people that don't have wealth or cash behind them when they start a business, you want to start out in your 20s and join the management team of a company somehow, or be an intricate part where you get equity in the company. So there's no risk to you. You're not signing up personally with the bank. You're not borrowing and begging money from friends, family, and, it's not all on your back. You just stay in your lane. If you're in the sales, if you're in tech, if you're in development, if you're in social media, you stay in your lane, but join a team, a small business. get that slice of equity from 1 to 10%, and roll with the company for 2 to 3 to 4 years. And then when the owner, the principal's owner, exit the company, you get your slice. But just as important, what I just said, you'll get your jump badge, and you can say, you know what, I helped start a business, we grew it, and I was in the management team, and I was an equity holder, and I did just great. Then after that, you'll be able to cycle through, and then now armed with some more cash, some more experience, and the victory on your track record, you can go after the bigger deal and take down your own company by yourself. And, that's the next step.
So where does someone go, say someone, hasn't entered this entrepreneurship game yet, and they want to, use the method that you said? How do they go about approaching a company and defining that skill set to enter into a deal like that?
Well, first of all, you really have to sit back and you have to arm yourself with knowledge before, right? You're trying to jump into something that you don't know anything about. You stay in your lane. If you have a great tech idea, or you have some idea that you really like, find the accountant, find somebody that can cover your weaknesses. If there's 4 or 5 components to make you a man in full or a woman in full, but you only have 30% of those skill set, you got to get covered on the other 70% and bring in people in those other verticals so that you're heading into combat with a full team.
So I want to backtrack a little bit. You talked about kind of your early career and jumping into some deals and getting messed with a little bit, and having some interesting deals that you entered that, in your perception, may not have been successful, but might have been, good learning experiences. What were those experiences like? What were you learning from them when you did enter into these deals and these guys, smarter guys, older guys, were kind of messing with you?
Yeah, the older guys didn't think they were messing with me. They were just using me like a tool. And I was a tool. I was full of energy, ambition, but I ended up signing bank notes for $10, $20 million. And I wasn't in control of the game, but that got me 10, 15% of the equity in these companies, because I was the guy ready to jump on the grenade because I was so hungry to be an entrepreneur. So, and then when push came to shove and things went a little south, I was the sacrificial lamb climbing up on the crucifix. And, but thankfully with some adroit maneuvering and these men having developed a conscience in the end, after they plucked me like a chicken, they, I scuttled away like a hermit crab and with my little victuals, and but I had enough to start my own company.
Right. So when you were entering into these deals, I think I see in a lot of new entrepreneurs, they have this fear of getting screwed over. So they never end up entering the deal. Would you say that it was better off that you got into these deals and got messed with a little bit and got that experience than?
Yes, I know where you're going with this, and it's true. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a guide or an advisor. I was just thrown in the wolf pit, and I was a wolf, but my teeth hadn't grown yet. And, if you're going to do something, you really got to find a strong, mostly older advisor that's been around the track once or twice. And you know what? The first couple sessions with these people, you sit there and you're like, okay, they'll give you free advice. But after a while, if you're doing something, you got to make it worth their while. And you got to make it more comfortable, saying, look, let's come to an arrangement, with what I'm doing. I'm going to try to do this. Let me give you 5-10% of the pie. And just for your advice, your coaching, and I'm really going to need you. And I'm going to make you a wad of money that you're without having to take the risk like I am. So getting it lined up with the right advisors who can bring in management teams. And, a lot of us don't like to study business. But learning the best course ever is, and it's torture to say, is accounting. You got to be able to understand the income statement and the balance sheet. The income statement is like a body in motion. The balance sheet is a snapshot of the body, like an X-ray. You have to know these two things. And if you don't, you're at somebody else's mercy, and you can have just awful things happen to you, and you can get blindsided. So no matter what, I think you should take it upon yourself to get out there. and look at the best books that you can see on the marketplace, and devise the books. Like the book that I wrote, I've written 3 books, and they all stay to what the fundamental entrepreneur needs to know to go into battle and to be able to talk some turkey with it.
So I see with a lot of people that are looking for mentors, they feel like they're imposing on the person that they want to, have as a mentor. And I hear them say, I don't want to bother him. I don't want to take his time. I don't want to ask him questions. How do you feel as being someone who is a mentor to so many people? What aspects of a person, how they approach you, makes you want to help them out?
Well, that's a really good question, because you don't, from the mentor's point of view, you don't want to take on something that is, not going to happen, or the guys or the gals totally out to lunch and they're heading. You can see it. They're blundering off the path already into the minefield, and it's, if we have a conscience and we want to save these people from the beginning, we should just coach them out of that. And the biggest thing I tell people to do is don't do it, because 85% of the deals don't happen well. So, and the deals that do happen well, again, don't go for the long ball. To go for a single or double, but you really got to, as a mentor, after a while, I don't mind doing it, for whatever reason, because I admire people who are throwing their hat in the arena, and it keeps me in touch with the new age of America. But after a while, people do expect to get reimbursed in one fashion or another through equity or future cash. Nobody likes to do everything for free after a while. You begin to feel like people are taking advantage of you.
So when you're evaluating someone who approaches you, or even evaluating an entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur, what are kind of the characteristics that you look for in a person that determine your intuition on whether they're going to be successful or not?
That's another good question. I mean, I look at, obviously what business they're going in, the verticals, the sectors. There's this thing called, I wrote into some of the books and I've had it published in articles. I call it the mad scientist syndrome. And I've seen it 30, 40, 50 times where people say, my God, my company's worth $50 million and I'm going to give you 1% just for mentoring me. You'll be in the money for $500,000. I say, oh my God, thank you so much. But the company's really worth nothing. And, and to drive these people and to find out, to separate the people who can get away from their sense of megalomania and their belief, in drinking their own Kool-Aid, and to getting them grounded into reality is really one of the main things. It's very amusing and it's very fun, but the best thing a mentor can do is bring people to reality if they like it or not. And I would say 30 or 40% very promising companies that I told the truth to, that people cut me right afterwards, which was fine because I didn't want to waste my time. And, and I'd say out of that 30, 40%, most of them failed because the smart coaches and advisors didn't want to get paid in what we would call Confederate dollars that were worthless after a while.
What would you say are the main reasons why a business will fail in your experience?
First of all, it's cash. In today's environment, look at the bank lending rates. It's brutal. For small businesses that are getting started, you still can go out there and get some nice loans from banks, but the banks are tight right now. So, but it's okay because if most of the deals that are starting are technology or social media related, like so many of them are, you don't need cash from a bank. So the failure is, going through and, do you have enough money? And then what is your timeline to marketplace? And then, people, no matter what, you got to show future investors or the marketplace that you know how to put together pro formas. How do you get your accountants lined up? How do you get, your growth strategy lined up? And then you have cap tables, your capitalization tables, which show who gets what for doing what. And, you as the primary owner, you don't mind giving up 25% of your business, 30% of your business to your team if they're going to drive the business. But, you want to ladle it out slowly over time. And there's a formula for everything. When a company's growing, the advisors, like mentors, can get anywhere from 1% to 5% of a business. You have someone doing business development gets 2.5%. CFO 2.5%. The president can get 5 to 7. The CEO 7 to 10. There's just a matrix, and then you have your formal board, and what do they do? People always talk about board of directors. Don't have a board of directors, because they can tell you what to do after a while, and they can take your company from you. What you want to have is a board of advisors who don't have any voting rights. Don't let these people slick talk into setting up a board of directors, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you'll be voted out. And I remember one time, this really difficult guy that I did work with. This guy and I were hired by Playboy to open up casinos around the world. It was hysterical. I was having the time of my life. We were flying all around the world, and but he, in the end, he got nasty. And Playboy, how should we say, took advantage of him, and then that flowed downhill to me. And there's just so many crazy stories out there, and it's all so much fun. But, you got to have everything in writing. This is another thing. Everyone does things on a handshake, and I still do it. And I should be embarrassed how many times I've been buggered by friends and things. Oh, my God, there's a misunderstanding, or you didn't produce, or it didn't happen. Get things in writing ahead of time. If you're putting money in, certainly. And if you're a dodo bird, if you don't. And then if you're spending over 20% of your time on a project, and it's looked like it's going to be 6 months of your time, you deserve to have it in writing. And if they're not giving it to you in writing, there's something smells wrong.
So what are the main things that you should cover in writing, like in a contract?
Well, what I see you, Jack, you're a little grand master of the AI and poking around with all the contracts. It's good. The AI contracts are nice, but they have to be seen, and they have to be cut and chopped and overlooked. But these lawyers, oh shit, don't get caught up with the lawyers too early, man. They're just awful, and they're pompous, and they're bullies, and then they want their, these $400 or $500 an hour, and before you know it, I'm vice chair of a company in overseas for Ukraine relief now, and we just got a lawyer bill for $192,000. We're like, what? We're trying to help the Ukraine people, and we got smoked by this law firm, and I'm not very happy about it. But it wasn't my end of the ship. I was an advisor, and the people that were supposed to be overseeing the lawyers' times, they ran amok. And you know what? Now the lawyers are like squawking, and they're going to put a lien on the company. So keep the lawyers away. Keep your contracts very simple, but until you grow. But don't be quick to bring on the lawyers.
So I'll say, in my entrepreneurial experience, my short entrepreneurial experience thus far, I have had one of the most difficult things for me is when you're dealing with people who are older and smarter than you, and you have boundaries that you want to set, but sometimes you feel like you're being disrespectful because you want to be respectful to these older people. How do you kind of set those boundaries? For instance, with a lawyer, that's telling you to do one thing one way.
It's really interesting, Jack, because I've been watching your company develop, and it's very promising and looking great. And I've already seen the turmoil that you've gone through when you're out pitching people that you at your youthful vigor, and your brain is far advanced. But what we're looking at is these people that are a little moronic, or in a position because their brain has been, calcified over the years of the younger people can't be as bright. But you know what? These people, you got to milk them, you got to use them, and you got to move them. And they got to milk and use you. It's a two-way street. But, the older people don't trust the younger, and the younger people don't trust the older. And that's why you need advisors and mentors to bridge that gap.
So for somebody who's looking to make this leap into entrepreneurship, maybe they don't have the business acumen and the fundamentals of business, but they have a good idea. They've made the commitment that they want to make the swap, and they have the drive. Where do they start? I know when I came to you with my first idea, you kind of started me with building a financial model to project out the business and see if it works on paper. Is that where you would recommend for a new entrepreneur looking to enter into the game with a new business?
Yeah, you don't have to go to a lawyer. You don't have to go to an accountant when you're beginning. You just have to find a savvy business person that's worked in a small business that can extrapolate, sit you down and just grill you and pull out of your cerebellum all the information and drop it into the mechanics of cash flow. And you're sitting there saying, "Oh, we could do this. We're going to grow by 20%." But then what are your cost of goods? And this goes back to that dreaded accounting course. But it shouldn't be dreaded at all because it's abstract when you're looking at these boring freaking books. But all of a sudden, when it's your life, it's like, holy shit, this all makes sense. And what does this mean over here? My cost of goods, and what is bad debt if my customer screws me out of 30% of my money? There's so many things that you have to learn. So I just really counsel you to get out there and find some good books and self-educate yourself on the growth.
So you've obviously had a long career in entrepreneurship. What would Rod now tell 25, 26-year-old Rod if there was one or two pieces of advice that you could give yourself?
When the average age at the top MBA schools in the country is 29.1 years old. And, I've had the good fortune to teach and guest lecture over at the Harvard Business School, Babson MBA program, which is one of the hottest programs in the country, in, 17 different schools I've taught. And, they give me the MBA classes and I sit there and I just tell them, you know what, this is not a exercise. And I'd like to teach crash and burns. I'd like to tell the gory stories of people committing suicide and families getting crushed and smart ass MBAs working for a big company that says, "Oh, let's just cut this branch in Maine down," and all of a sudden 100 families are out of work. It's not a theoretical exercise. It's blood and guts. You got to get out there. And, for the young entrepreneurs, the world is even better now. All these older people, the generational wealth is going to be slipping toward all the younger generations. If in the age from 22 to 40 right now, man, the money's going to flow because it's a lot of people. The stock market's the stock market, but shit, people have made bundles. And you know what? If you have the right offering, looking for $50,000 to $100,000, you should be able to get those chunks of cash. So if you're looking for $1 million, you know what? You try to get one lead investor for $250 or $500, and then you fill it out with other people. But then there's smart money and there's stupid money. And the smart money is the people that, where you're going into the sector, believe what you're doing and become a spokesman for you. And then there's not so, the passive money, which is just from people that have no idea, but just like the idea and it sounds good to them. They're amateurs. They're not really going to help you. So you really want to hunt for smart money.
So you say you like to teach the crash and burn stories. What is a crash and burn story that you like to tell that you think is a good?
There's so many, and I could go on. It's more colorful and interesting than anything you're watching on television. I'm telling you, because it's real life. Greed, avarice, lust, power, money, wealth, riches. You've seen it all. So, sometime we'll go out for a beer. You can get me back on the show, and I'll have a couple beers while I'm talking, and I'll have a list of 3 or 4 maybe on my next show, and I'll torture everyone with these weird scenarios that unfold that are more interesting than just about anything else in life. When I was young, I thought business was so freaking boring. I was like, oh my God, I'll blow my brains out if I'm going to be a businessman. I tried to get in the CIA. I tried this and that. I did everything I could to avoid being a businessman. But then once I found out, it's just not about the numbers. It's a huge adventure and a life and death struggle, especially in the world of entrepreneurship. It's the road less traveled, but I'm telling you, it's a rock'em sock'em life or death game that isn't for the weak.
So, Rod, we've had a lot of conversations outside the mic, and I know that you've done a lot of deals in business with the military. You've talked to me a little bit about your Navy SEALs 80% rule. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we all get to do, I run this mergers and acquisition firm, so we've done over 270 transactions, and it's just been a long, crazy game. But I've always enjoyed, the military. I was always into military history, this and that. So why not get involved in the military? And one of the rules they had that I think applies directly to entrepreneurship is it's the 80-20 for special forces, where you never can have everything buttoned up as an entrepreneur. You can't sit there and dot everything. Everything's moving too fast. And most of the military, when they're doing something, they get to the 80% surety level that it's going to work, and they pull the trigger and they go for it. If you wait to 90 or 95, then everything on the ground or everything shifts around, and it's not what it is, what it was like 3 weeks before. So once you have to take a plunge at some time. So you size it up, you get to that brinkmanship of 80% that a lot of people use, and then you pull the trigger, because you're never going to get to 100%. So get there, get a consensus or a majority consensus. If there's 5 smart people on your management team or whatever, and you got 3 or even 4 of them, then you go.
So you advocate for the 70-30 rule of entrepreneurship. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The 70-30 rule is one of the best rules that I've sort of developed and I talk to people about. When you're at 70%, do you go and work as a young person and do something like accounting or something that you don't want to do, sales? You're just grinding up because you got to make a living. You want to, make 50 grand, and you want to make 100, then you want to make 2, then you want to make 3, and then you want to save out of the 3, you want to save 200 and get your freedom. So there's 2 ways of looking at this entrepreneurship thing. Is you can work your ass off, be part of the machine, the thundering herd for the 70%, or you can go out in the field of battle where you're just a hardcore entrepreneur. But you know what? Taking the 70% of life and working and doing 30% side hustles or side gigs where you're enjoying it, making auxiliary income, or in my case, traveling, I've been over to 60 countries now doing business and education around the world. 70% of my work life is drudgery. 30% is where the action's at. And out of that 30%, most of my fun is I'm getting it from overseas, where I'm just, and besides having business, I'm, the clash of cultures and everything else. Like we just got sucked into a $1 billion raise down in Guatemala, where I'm heading on Tuesday, to raise money for a railroad line. The Panama Canal water is going down. They have to have an alternate route. So they're going to build a railway from Guatemala up through Mexico into the United States, where they can, the ships from Asia can unload there. I mean, how much fun is this? I can't believe that I have the honor that they've put us in the head of a project like this. And, then after a while on that 30%, I get to do this. I get to go to Ukraine. I get to go and, chase my dreams. I probably don't make a lot of money doing these things. I'm grinding for 70, but 30% of my time is spent, in the whirlwind of, and I don't remember so much everything else, but I do remember my 30%.
Do you think that putting quality of life over income is important as an entrepreneur?
When most entrepreneurs get too deep into the business, they call it the balance of work, love, and play. When I was young, I was like, what's that mean? But as I got older, I circle back to it quite a bit, and I'm really a proponent of it. It's, having, like the three nozzles, work, we all know. Love is, is family, children, whatever, that is. And then play is what you do to entertain yourself and stay healthy. And you try to keep a balance between these 3. But for entrepreneurs, Jesus, there's 70% work. The family and the home usually suffers, and they manage to play a little bit. But to try to keep that balance, you always have to regulate yourself, because it's always a sprint as an entrepreneur. But you know what? It really isn't. It's a marathon. So, but you can get burnt out. So, looking at what you want to do as an entrepreneur, you look at it as like a major league baseball, football, basketball. You do it 3 to 5 years. You know what? And if you're looking at it If you're looking at a whole lifetime of work, when I like talk to my three kids and all their, huge amount of friends that I get to interact with, they're all like kind of horrified that they got 40 years of work ahead of them. But I say, you know what? If you want to take this road less traveled, you work for 3 to 5 years and then you take a break. Then you go to Panama and screw around, have some fun. You buy some land, you do some good things there. You go, you indulge yourself. You work it, you crush it, and then you relax and entertain it. And then you know what? Then you get your next gig for another 3 to 5 and see how you do with that. It's a hectic, helter-skelter world, but I'm telling you, you're going to live a full life. And I sit now with people my age, and they're all got their bad hips and they're retiring, and I listen to them talk. Oh, I never really went on vacation. My God, my company needed me. And I'm looking at the guy in the chair. Jesus, I'm like, well, man, I'm glad I wasn't you, but they probably look at me and say, I'm glad I wasn't you.
So you talked before about the Navy SEAL 80% rule and working with the military. You've obviously done some deals internationally. How does international business compare to business in the U.S.?
You know what? For all of us that have the wanderlust of travel, and we look at these foreign lands and there's such, opportunity. It's like 90% failure. It's really difficult to do business overseas. They think differently than we do. As much as I am a man of the world, I'm very glad that America has oceans on either side of us. It keeps us out of the fray. You look all the way from Mexico down to Argentina, the whole place is in the doldrums. You look in Europe, what's happening now, China's changing. It's a quagmire, and most gringos or us American-based people who are really put our best foot forward to be good, straightforward business people, the other people, a lot of them are serpents, and it's life or death for them. For us, it's a thrust into business, but we all manage to make a good living, and in the end, and we all have a good life. We don't miss a meal. Overseas, they're piranhas and sharks, but if you are going to venture into deals overseas, you have to get a partner in that country and be at his mercy. There's and the 4 or 5 deals that I'm involved with where I have ownership in overseas, I really enjoy my partners, and they're well trusted, they're well tested. But then I've had a couple where people absconded with the funds too. So look at overseas. Don't make it the primary thrust of your business, or the numbers are going to show you that nothing good's going to come of it.
So you started Briggs Capital. You're the president of Briggs Capital. How did you start that business, and how did you get into M&A?
To me, as I told you before, I had the good, the bad, and the ugly of my 3 deals, and then I had enough of owning, running businesses. But I loved the game so much that I joined the mergers and acquisition worlds, where I can be a sponsor, co-pilot, mentor. I can put the deals together. We can raise the cash. I'm in the game, but frankly, as an advisor, my group, it's really metamorphosized over the years, and it's just been a wonderful life of examining different opportunities every day from different areas, and it's a big puzzle. It's like a big chess game. I'm playing right now like 16 different chess games at once, and for me, that's a thrill, and it's not even about business.
So you talked before about, entrepreneurs kind of drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking their company's worth $40-50 million. And I know I've been in that situation where I don't really know how to evaluate my company. And I just think, it is worth $100 million in my head. But realistically, there is a process for evaluating a company. How do you determine how much a company's worth?
This is really one of the most painful exercises for an entrepreneur. Or a family business, or somebody that's inherited their business from their parents and they're running it, their friends, and the world whispers to them, my God, you're sitting on a gold mine. And if only we can reach this level and we can just claw up the mountain a little further, we're going to be rich. But no, it's not true. It's very rarely true. And that's just the hardship of the game. but there's nothing wrong with making millions instead of tens of millions. And for those of you that get to the tens of millions, you know what? You're like the lucky sperm cell. I'm telling you, it's a harsh game out there to make. If anyone can start from nothing with zero, and sit there and stroke a check 3 to 5 years later in their 20s to get 10 to 20 to 30 million bucks, they should be saluted by their communities because it's a rarity. But who's to say you don't get your slice of it? And who's to say you don't land several million bucks and then rest, look at the playing field, and then on the next deal, you take 2 million, you pop it into the next one, and that's where you put your 2 million and it turns into 20 million. And that's, you know what, then you're 40 and you're all set. It's the promised land.
Yeah. So, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but, you mentioned that deal that you're doing down in Guatemala, and I apologize that I'm jumping around. It's just as it's coming in my train of thought. What are kind of the variables that you're looking at in a deal? Like, what are you trying to manage to keep the deal in your control so that it goes as planned?
Well, nothing goes as planned overseas because, we're just outriders and advisors. So on that deal, we're raising an enormous amount of money. But it's a railroad deal. So we go to railroad businesses, and there's people that fund railroads, and there's international banks and funds, and it's just a fascinating matrix of building as quickly as we can the revenue, and and who can invest in that. And of course, you could imagine the financial models in these things are something that really is like out of Tesla or something. But that deal is a little bit different. And the other international deals that I work on, they are much smaller, more scalable, again, toward the privately held family-owned businesses. And the Latin deals, we're involved in like 7 of them now, and none of them are going well. Everyone, they talk and they pinch each other and they spend money, but the Latins, I'm finding over the last 20 years, it's very hard to conclude businesses with them. But, but then think about it. The Europeans, oh my God, the French, the Germans, they're okay. But, we could go around and it's, Jack, if you have me back, we can break down each country and I could go through all the characteristics of dealing with these different countries. But, it's an interesting country is Canada. Okay, they're our neighbor to the north. They're, 1/10 our size, 1/10 of everything. But they are an untapped market for so much of America. And again, I don't mean to generalize, but they are not sharks like us on the whole. They're more they're more socially responsible. They're more worried about saying the correct things, and they're more, and they're always saying, "I'm sorry, so sorry." I'm like, "Why are you sorry?" I said, "I'm not sorry. I want to make everybody money here. Let's make money." So, the Canadians are very interesting. I've done some great deals, and there's powerful people there, obviously, but they're a different animal than us too, and maybe even a better animal than we are because we're aggressive people.
So it's interesting that you're kind of judging these businesses based on the types of people. Do you think that the variable of the person itself has more influence on whether the deal is successful, how a person acts? Are you analyzing that more than you're even analyzing the business model itself? I've found that, humans are wild cards, and like if I don't match up with the people, I can judge pretty quickly whether or not the deal is going to work out based on the people from even the very first meeting.
Yeah, well, you're in a very interesting business where you're dealing with well-grounded people who are finite thinkers, who are dealing with earth, erosion, movement of money and goods. I mean, the technology people are the wild cards, because most of them aren't sound financially, and they're rip-roaring with their numbers, and they're the mad scientist club. They're all the president of my mad scientist club, the tech people, and so there's like businesses and industries. There's like 17 classified sectors of business, and each sector has its own valuation matrix. And each sector has its own genre of people that do very well in the business. And if you did a psychological profile of these 17 different people and brought these 17 different people with the same amount of success into a room for a drink, I think it would be like a bunch of aliens looking at each other.
What are your favorite business models?
Well, the tech is great because it's go big or go home. It's where the big money is and it's the big play. And, you don't have to create something new. You want to be the shovel and the pick. You want to be something, an auxiliary product that can be a bell and a whistle. You don't need to be the main thruster, the breakthrough technology. You want to be something that some company will say, oh, we got to have them. We're going to ladle them into our whole distribution network. We're going to run them through our channels. And with our 17 channel partners, we'll be able to take that product, and get a 7% margin on it, which is $3 million to us. And if you take $3 million and you multiply by 10, that company could be worth $30 million. So, you can do the math really quick. It's cycled through very quickly. But the tech, I think, is the most dangerous but most rewarding. But I like, then you have your manufacturing section, which is
man, I hate manufacturing.
I know. I don't. It's hard, and it's usually handed down from family to family. You can't just jump in. You can do outsourced manufacturing. So we did this deal. These two guys, great guys. We end up selling this company for over $100 million. They made the tiles that when you go to by the railroad station, the yellow tiles with the bumps. These guys went out, high school guys, buddies. They went out and they built it. And they built this thing up, and they didn't even have their own factories. They shifted it off to all these companies that were hurting because Detroit wasn't doing it. They made those things. They built a distribution model, and they sold for over $100 million. Oh, those guys were awesome.
Wow, yeah. And it's funny because you talk about not having to be first to the race. And our last guest, Jose Goldner, had talked about on the episode that he only likes to enter deals when he's first to the race and when he's come up with it. How do you kind of differentiate those two methods?
Well, these gentlemen were older. So, when we're talking for entrepreneurs from, 20 to 35 or 40, I'd say, you go for the single or double. These boys had already done it once and they had the money to start this company. And it was like, $4 or $5 million. And they were in their 50s and 60s. They were in their prime and they worked it for a long time. And, but when we were talking about manufacturing, outsource manufacturing, if you got something, there's somebody that's going to do it. It used to be in China. Now they're swinging over to Vietnam and these other countries. And now before it was offshore. Now it's onshore. What's going to be built in the Americas? Mexico is just now past China for the first time in 20 years before the rise of China, now the decline of China. Now Mexico is importing and doing more goods and manufacturing more than anyone else shipping into the United States. Mexico's a great place to do business.
So now that I've been an entrepreneur for a couple of years, I find that a lot of my friends and people solicit me their ideas kind of to run it by me as a sounding board. And I find that a lot of these ideas are like products that require manufacturing. What is kind of the process do you think that's even a good business to enter? Is that they're setting themselves up for doom? If they do start that process, should they, offshore to China or like kind of, talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm following you on that. You know what? Again, it's like in technology, you're not going to, or medicine, you're not going to be the breakthrough person, most likely. It's going to be done in a lab or a think tank, or it's going to be done over at MIT or something. You want to do something that somebody else has already done, and you're just taking a slight different variation of the theme, rebranding it, remarketing it, and reselling it, and streaming along. You don't want to be the first. You don't want to be the icebreaker, going against all the negative friction, trying to introduce something new to a marketplace. You want to take something that's already successful and do it one step better or one step different. And with the social media and selling and the quick to market strategies and the availability of scalability now, you want to just jump. And you know what? Again, if that company's making $1 billion, your company makes 20 million, that's just fine for you.
So how do you, as an early entrepreneur, with very little credibility or experience? How do you get that momentum going for, something that you're trying to do? I always talk about and live by kind of fake it till you make it. I don't know if that's the best method. It's worked for me in the past, but how do you kind of get that credibility to start getting some momentum with your projects?
Well, it's interesting, Jack, that you said fake it till you make it. You know what? You already had made it, but you thought you were faking it. You have the right product, the right game, and that's why your company's being so successful. For other people, you know what? You just got, again, it's blocking and tackling a business, knowing your numbers, getting some advisors, getting people in, if you got something good going on, cut the cake up. Don't agonize that you're giving 5 or 10% away to somebody that, oh my God, do you realize I'm giving you $7 million? No, give them a slice of the cake.
What about partnerships? Do you think it's a good method, or do you think that's setting yourself up for failure?
Oh, that's a whole nother beast. Partnerships and 50-50 partnerships are tough because if it comes to a battle, you grind each other into dust and the company's gone. Somebody should have one leg up over the other person, but 51-49 never really is kind of a strange thing. 60-40, 70-30 is usually better. But having a 50-50 partner, then you may need somebody that can be a tiebreaker because usually two partners do two different things. One guy does manufacturing and distribution. The other one does finance and money and HR. They're two different animals, and they're going to disagree. And one could be conservative and one could be aggressive. And there's going to be a beef. So 50-50 partnerships, there's got to be a way for a tiebreaker.
What are the most valued employees, or maybe they're not an employee, maybe you're hiring them through equity, but what are the most valued positions to have in an early startup?
Well, you know what? It's like a football team. Who's the quarterback? Who's the running back? The running backs, the wide receivers, those are the salespeople. Who's grinding it in the interior line? The unsung heroes of the business. You just got to sit back, and venture or any people that are going to invest are going to want to see a traditional management team built out with each spot covered like a bingo card. So you want to sit there and you're going to say, here's our business development. Here's our VP of sales. Even if it's bullshit, you got to lay it out that way because that's what people want to see.
Is it better to have kind of the person at the helm being more of that abstract visionary, or to be the more pragmatic operational person? Have you found
the person at the helm should, if it's not a tech-based company and if it's not IP-based, that person at the helm should be the person that's driving the revenue. The person, they don't have to be the salesperson all the time, but they're the ones that landed the first 3 or 4 big accounts or strategic partnerships. If there's no revenue, there's no company. So, you got to be, companies under 5 million and certainly less than that. The owner founder has to deliver usually 50% of the revenue.
And we're getting pretty close to the end here, but you've seen with my company, we're trying to kind of incubate entrepreneurs, and I like to start these guys out making cold calls because I found that, when I did the door-to-door job, that was such a big learning experience for me. If you can make it in straight commission sales, you really can make it in anything. But I find that a lot of people want to enter into entrepreneurship, but want to avoid doing sales. Is there any way to avoid doing sales if you're a founder and CEO?
Well, if you're going to avoid it, you better have something that other people covet that it's going to sell itself, right? And then if you're not going to do the sales and the marketing, then you got to attract somebody to doing it. With your company, one of the things that you did great right out of the chute is you're giving the salespeople, which is unusual, such chunks of equity. I think it was awesome. It was almost too much for me to vote on to approve, but now I can see the wisdom of it because of different sales cycles and everything else. So giving cutting the cake. And then, if there's 2 types of cutting the cake and giving equity. There's, giving them actual percentages in the business. Then you can give them options, which is better because they're not in the cap tables and you don't have to say, oh, this guy owns 3%, he owns 2%, this guy owns 5%, this guy owns 6%. You can say, I own 100% of the company, but I've given away 20% of the value of the company in an option pool. And those people are not on the balance sheet, but they have a right to the equity when the company is sold. When you give stock to somebody, if you have a $5 million company and you give 10% of the stock to somebody at zero founder's price, that person has just landed a $500,000 tax liability, and he's got to pay $200,000 in taxes. He doesn't want to do that. And what happens if the company, that person could suffer and take that stock and pay the $200,000, and then the company doesn't go well, the government makes out, and this person, besides not making any money, will have paid taxes. By using options and an option pool, the people only get paid when the company is sold and there's a liquidity event. And that way is much safer for everybody.
That's super interesting. And kind of what you were talking about before, just to make it clear to the audience, how I, in the beginning of the company, needing to raise people to help expand sales, it was difficult having low cash flow being a startup. And when you hire people and you pay them a salary, it's immediately a risk for the company. And so kind of how we alleviated risk was by creating that big incentive at the end of the pie by, the revenue that you generate for the company, buying you equity and large commission shares. So we were giving up more value, but we were alleviating some risk because the only way that we're giving up that value is if we were successful. So we wanted to raise $10 million in revenue, which is why we pieced together that model to alleviate that risk, but guarantee the success if we were going to give away that money.
Yes, I thought it was a risky play in the beginning, but it looks like it's going to pay off. And besides, the direct owners, I think other people could walk away with some very, very nice money on their first step to becoming an entrepreneur.
And so from the people that have entered the deal, it can be difficult. And I've been in that position where you're straight commission and you don't know how where your next check's going to come from, if it's going to ever work out, because it is kind of a pie in the sky, and you have to have that confidence to get to that, light at the end of the tunnel. How have you dealt with in your career kind of the chaos and the stress of the unknown of entrepreneurship?
You know what? I haven't done with it very well. I ended up in 2 or 3 emergency rooms thinking I was having a heart attack, and now it's very amusing. If we ever had a drink, I'll have you in stitches about me. One time they were ripping my shirt off, thinking I had a heart attack. I was very healthy, athletic, 35-year-old guy, and the doctor looked down at me and goes, "Oh, Rod, you're back." The guy in the emergency room, he's getting the paddles out. He's like, "Rod, Jesus, let's sit up. You're fine. Just having another bad week, are you, kid?" And and I was, "Oh, am I okay?" And I was a little sheepish. He says, "Why don't you just get a better, easier job?" And I never did. But I've learned to deal with stress, and that's a whole nother subject too, to talk about stress, because stress is a killer, and how to harness stress and make it work for you. This is really something that it's because every night when you're not making money and you're hoping on the come that you're on something that's going to be big, or if it's not looking good, there's another subject. When do you cut bait and get out, and how do you protect yourself if you signed up on banknotes or you owe people money? There's that. This is what I enjoy talking about with the crash and burns, because it's one thing, it's a happy story for everyone to make money, but I think everyone who enters the arena has to understand what the downstroke is, and you want to live to fight for another day.
Yeah, and I think that, what I've done in my own personal experience is I have always tried to focus, or not focus on the money as much as I've focused on the knowledge from the experiences. I've found that if my biggest priority is learning, then I'm not really as afraid of the risk, because at the end of the day, that knowledge is what's going to generate the income from me and having those skills. So I've never been afraid to enter a deal or go into business with a person or try something out, because at the end of the day, if it led to me not having money, that would have been the expense of getting that experience and that knowledge.
That's true as long as you're not signing any bank loans, or
Right.
if the crash and burn you had is just a mild one and it's just no harm, no foul. We did our best and let's fold up shop and we learned we're going to jump into something else. But if the bank's after you, you're ruining your credit. If you're there, all those things, you really have to protect yourself. That if you decide to walk away from the game, that you're just walking away from the game and there'll be another game for you, but you don't want the dogs of the finance world, chirping at you and coming after you. And so you could never, pursue an orderly life and your next adventure.
So we're hitting the hour mark here, so I'll wrap it up. But you're a very well-read guy. Is there any books that you would recommend to anyone listening that you find are useful or beneficial?
For me, I do business so much that I don't like to read business books. I find business books to be horribly boring. I'd rather read about Napoleon or, what's going on now in Ukraine and, what's happening with the Chinese economy. I think, and as you're dealing with older people, to be well-versed in what's happening in the world, not just in politics, but, for people should understand what's happening in China right now. They're taking a huge step back. Their exports are tumbling. Their economy's imploding. The people from 20 to 35 it's a real issue. One last thing that I think is fascinating about the world is the United States has 76 million people from the age of 18 to 34. China has 330 million people from 18 to 34. India has 880 million people. 2/3 of their population are young. Everyone's got to watch India. They're going to be the big player coming up. They've already surpassed China in population, but China's population is getting really old. With all the immigration issues the United States have, these immigrants that are coming in, maybe 30% of them are no good, but 70% are going to be the future of America, and they're going to be good workers. And when everything settles down with this immigration stuff, we're going to be glad that a lot of these people came to us. That's
a really interesting point. Just to kind of wrap it up here, do you have any last remarks for anyone listening to this podcast?
Hey, just as an entrepreneur, I say go for it. You always can go get a job. You know what? The people that I've seen over the decades that always wanted to do it, never did it, they feel unfulfilled a little bit at the end. And you know what? At one time in your life, it's not like before where you went to Kodak and you worked for 40 years and got the golden watch. Everything's a 3 to 5 year gig. And if you don't, just jump to the next one. If you jump 3 times, one of the 3 should hit. And if you do it correctly and get in with the right people, and if you're one of the 3 that hits, the next time you could double and triple down and on you go to a magnificent life.
All right, Rod, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to talk to us, and we'll end it there.
Hey, I enjoyed it. You got me going, and you know what? I look forward to talking to everyone again.
All right, we'll definitely have you back. Well, that concludes episode 2 of Shaking Hands Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Moran. You can find me on Instagram at Blue Collar Kid. That's Blue Collar KEHD. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, please do not hesitate to reach out. If you like the show, please subscribe. And with that being said, stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more interesting guests and conversations. So see you next time.